who I've known for quite some time now, and he'll be talking to us about some of his work and how it came about. So thanks, Mike.
And you'll flag me when I'm running out of time?
Yes.
Okay. So hi, my name is Mike, and I've been involved in these SaTC and predecessor programs for a while. I want to echo what Rebecca said, which is that I was one of those when she said, hey, you should stand up and give a talk as a success story. I was sort of, well, I'm not so sure I'm a success story, but in truth, I am very grateful for these programs because they have provided a very substantial fraction of my support over the last, well, decade or so. This is a rundown of the different grants that I've had through these different projects. Co-PI here means, or these different programs. Co-PI here means that basically I was the lead investigator at a subordinate institution on the project. So I was part of the team on one of the smaller universities there. But as you see, there's a mix here of kind of large and small things. I put these in quotes because these are the labels that NSF uses. That last one, you'll notice, we put in as a medium and got funded at a far reduced fraction, so I kind of annotated that as small. But that's how it goes sometimes, right? It's just the way that it goes. So I can't tell you about all of these in the 15 minutes or so that I have. What I wanted to do was give you a sense for a couple of them in terms of how the work came about, what we're doing in them. But also, I couldn't help it. I want to try to give you some lessons learned. And so we'll see how that goes. But hopefully the experiences we've had will be useful to you guys going forward. So let me talk about the first one, which is the first one on that list. It was a center scale project that we got in 2004. This is one of the first rounds of, out of the first round of the Cyber Trust Program Center Awards. And so it's quite old by now, and you'll see good evidence of that in a few minutes. So basically this was a team that consisted of 10 faculty members at Carnegie Mellon University, where I used to be. And the way this came about is that many of us were doing different kinds of work in modeling interactions at various levels of the network protocol stack, network layer, application layer, into human layer, to try to develop essentially anomaly detection at the social network level, or sorry, one of those social network levels. So the idea would be, if you look at the patterns of interaction, can you tell when things aren't right in a way that might indicate badness is happening, right? There's some kind of malfeasance going on, and then you might develop defenses based on that. And we noticed that there was this commonality amongst several subgroups of these 10 in the approaches we were taking to do that modeling and to do the kinds of anomaly detection that we were after. And so what we did is we sort of, in a bottom-up way, formed this vision of security through interaction modeling. Again, the focus being modeling interactions, you might call it social networks, but I want to preface this by saying this was before Facebook, okay? So this is a long time ago. At various levels of the network stack, to develop methods for detection of attacks and also defending against those attacks. And again, it was done in a very bottom-up fashion. Now, I won't run through the work that was done in this center. It's really quite broad. I did want to, though, convey one of the lessons that we learned from it in a rather harsh way in the following respect. So we had a site visit about 18 months in, and we felt very good going into the site visit. We thought we'd done some really great stuff. We were, been very productive, felt like we had a lot of output. And what we achieved was, we thought, consistent with where we had proposed to go and so forth. Unfortunately, the site visit didn't go well at all. Why, you ask? Well, so there's a lesson in this. And the reason was that the visit team largely felt that we were focused too much on what I would call pure research advances and not enough on transition. And the acronym that came out of the site visit was bright, shiny objects, right? They wanted to know what were the bright, shiny objects that were going to come out of the research. The lesson here is that NSF, like everybody, answers to someone. In NSF's case, it's Congress. And they have to defend their program to Congress, right? And part of doing that is being able to hold up bright, shiny objects, things, sort of new technologies that are coming out that the man or woman on the street can really get behind and understand why NSF gets the kinds of funds it gets to fund this kind of research. And so this is just something that, particularly if you're thinking of engaging in a frontier level kind of proposal, I think you should keep in mind. Now, I think it plays at all levels in some sense. And yes, we're all here to do research, and the NSF program managers are here to support that, but we have to give them things to defend their programs with as well. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you think about how you're going to frame what you're going to work on. Fortunately, there were things in our project that we could bring up and elevate to the level of bright, shiny objects. This is a very old video. You're going to see, you're going to laugh at it. This goes back now to around 2005 or 6, I guess. Luyo Bauer is in this. If you know Luyo, he was my co-lead on this project called Gray. This is one of our developers trying to get into Luyo's office and he can't get in. And we developed this system called Gray that would allow him first to, by taking a picture of that barcode next to his door, contact a controller for the lock on that door, and then be challenged with the access control policy that he would need to demonstrate to get into that office. And what you see this person doing here is basically sending a request to someone in his address book to say, hey, look, I need some credentials that I don't have to get into this office. Well, there's Luyo, if you know Luyo. And he just gets this request. And what's going on behind the scenes is that there's a reasoning engine for helping Luyo figure out whether to give access to Dave and also how to give access to Dave. There can be many ways of doing it. Maybe he just wants to do a special one-time thing. In this particular example, what he's doing is he's adding David Swayze to a group of developers who have already been given access to that office. But all this is done through an automated reasoning system. One thing it also does is figure out the side effects. If I give Dave access by adding him to the developers group, by the way, you are aware that you just added Dave to these other resources as well. And so basically through this process, he gets permission and can enter the door. And we used to do this demo all the time live, where I would set up a video camera on my office door in a talk like this, and I'd call somebody and say, hey, try to get in. They couldn't get in, and there all of a sudden my phone's getting a request, and I'm giving them access, and then they get in. And it made for a great demo, a great bright, shiny object, if you will. But also, I do think this has been sort of a neat project for demonstrating some pretty otherwise difficult to grok technologies. We actually, so the rightmost picture is the floor plan of the building that I just showed that on. All those little green and red circles were the doors that we equipped with this. And then when I moved to UNC, there was a new wing of the building being built, so we put it in there too. Of course, there's nothing special about doors here, right? It's not that we're all, crazy about door access, but this is a great way to get people to use it on a day-to-day basis, and we still have an active user community for this technology. We've learned a tremendous amount about it, just by the fact that people are willing to use it on a day-to-day basis. And so this is something else that you should think about when making your proposals is, think of ways to eat your own dog food, as they used to, as I've heard several times, right? Because it really does help mature technology, and it can help elevate ideas up to these bright, shiny objects that end up helping the program managers support the programs and so forth. I'll convey one other lesson about this, this particular center. I'm not sure what your takeaway is going to be from this, but we had a tremendous turnover through the course of this project. And what I mean by that is, you remember I said 10 faculty. Well, over the course of the grant, 3 of them moved to other universities, myself included. 1 left academia permanently. 1 went on leave for a startup. I'm not talking about a short leave, I'm talking about a multi-year leave. Another 1 went on a multi-year leave to go to NSF. And then 2 more were promoted into administration, like department head and up, dean and so forth. So of the 10, we're down 8, basically. Roughly speaking, that's what happened. And I think the takeaway here was that there's a lesson in that, leadership is actually important, especially for these large projects, that you have folks involved who can manage this kind of turmoil. Now, again, I don't know how many of you are thinking about proposing at a frontier scale, but I think that's part of the equation, is that the panel and the people evaluating these things want to see that, okay, bad stuff is going to happen when you get a big group together, is the composition such that it'll be able to carry forward in the perhaps extreme event that most people leave. So that was one of the projects I wanted to mention. The second one I want to talk about briefly is, I guess it was third or fourth on that list. There's a virtual cloud computing project that's still ongoing. This is a large project that was funded under the TC program in 2009. The lead institution on this is NC State. Peng Ning is the PI on it. And there are various other institutions all right in the area where you're currently sitting, right, that are involved in this project. The technical focus here is virtualization and cloud security, and this is obviously sort of riding the wave of adoption of clouds in everything we do. And so one of the projects here, or this project, is really focused on looking at this from a security point of view. Now, our group in this project specifically started focusing on trusted platform modules and technologies that build on them. So, for example, things like Flickr that we had developed before, we brought into this project and wanted to do some additional things with it. But more recently, our efforts have turned toward timing channel attacks and defenses in cloud environments. And just to give you a sense for what that is, if you're not familiar, because these are pretty relatively, I think, unknown things. So, of course, the emergence of clouds we're familiar with, right? It used to be the case that companies had their own data centers and they would do their own thing in their data centers. Increasingly, this is no longer the case. Companies are outsourcing what they do to large clouds, and some of them are very, well known in the community, like Amazon or Rackspace. The concern that we have in the context of timing side channels in particular is the fact that when company A and company B put their tasks into the cloud, company B might actually ship a VM to the cloud that looks for signals based on how it's running as to what its co-residents on different boxes are doing. And that sounds a little bizarre because you think, hey, Zen's there, or you have a hypervisor that's doing good isolation. It turns out it's quite hard to do that isolation very effectively. And to prevent all information from flowing from one VM to another, it's really quite difficult. And in fact, one of the things that, one of the results we've had in the context of this project is where we've developed what we believe to be the first high-fidelity cross-VM side-channel attack. In fact, if you're going to stick around for the conference, it's being presented tomorrow afternoon. And this is at a fidelity sufficient to extract a cryptographic key. And what I mean by that is that one VM deployed in the cloud that's co-resident with another can extract a cryptographic key that the other one's using. Just by watching its own behavior on the shared functional units that it's using with this co-resident victim VM. Now, of course, one of the things we're not really, the project is not focused on developing new attacks, right? We do this with the hopes of developing new defenses, and we are working on other kinds of architectures to convincingly defend against this class of attacks. In the meantime, of course, physical isolation is still the best for your very sensitive jobs. And one of the things that we had done also as part of this work was to use side channels to detect unwanted co-residency. So if you get a dedicated instance from Amazon, for example, they tell you you're running alone, but they don't give you the ability to verify that you're running alone. So the question is, how can you tell if you're running alone? And so we developed some technology that will allow friendly VMs to use side channel attacks, if you will, to defend themselves, to find out if something else is running on their machine that they didn't think should be there. Now, this is an interesting sort of how did the research develop story, because the whole work on attacks actually came from this work. This work was our first foray into understanding side channel attacks better on these cloud platforms. Once we established this beachhead, it gave us enough knowledge to understand how to do the attack. And so this is a great example of how one project built on another. So that's really all the comments I had. I don't know if I have time for additional questions or...
You need to get back next door, I think, because we could do all the questions at the end of the 4 speakers, or if you need to go, we could give you a little time.
I probably should go.
Okay.
So if there are any pressing questions, or... I'll also be around at the conference for all 3 days, so if you guys want to catch me there, that's fine too.
So we'll break protocol a little bit just for Mike, since he needs to get back to the other meeting that I dragged him out of so that he could talk to you guys. So we could take 1 or 2 questions for him, and then for the other speakers, we'll save the questions to the end of the other 3.
Hi, Mike. I think your project sounds very impressive to me. Here I have a question about the proposal writing thing related to the research project. For NSF proposals require to discuss about the broader impact of the research project. So how did you typically justify the broader impact? For example, for the securing through interaction modeling project you did in Scilab with CMU. So can you frame it?
Sure. Yeah, so the broader impact story for the STEM Center was primarily focused around the development of these technologies that we felt would have potential uses outside of pure academia, like the video I showed you, but also curriculum development. This idea of studying social networks at all layers of the protocol stack, in fact, has given rise to a lot of, I think, lessons that can be brought into the classroom, and that we now see playing out in lots of different kinds of products and different technologies that are available. And so I think I'd have to go back and look at what we, sort of exactly how we wrote that proposal. It's been a long time, right? And I don't remember it that well. But as best I remember, those were the two key things that we were pushing on for broader impacts.
Okay, thanks, Mike.